So, thank you, Troy, for being here. And I just want to sort of explain why information literacy is so important in relation to this category. Not only is information literacy just important, period, intrinsically important, but information literacy used to be a part, like a formal component of the oral communication requirement. Because the oral communication requirement is no more, I mean, we're still teaching COM 101, of course, but those are not critical thinking classes. They satisfy that requirement. So there's a understandable desire on everybody's part to make sure that we don't lose those essential information literacy learning outcomes. And they fit so well in critical thinking. So we always have Troy and or Dave come to talk to us just to explain a little bit about the resources they can provide and about what information literacy might look like. So take it away, Troy.
Great. Well, thank you, Donna. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've met some of you, but if you haven't met me before, my name is Troy Espy, and I'm one of the librarians here at UW-Stevens Point. And I really want to thank Donna for inviting me to this. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, that used to be my pet peeve until I was at a virtual conference, and about 10 minutes into my presentation, when my co-presenter said, Troy, were you going to show some slides? So yeah, so now I do ask, even though it kind of grates on me. I'm like, of course you can see my screen. Okay, anyway, so like Donna said, COM 101 used to be a requirement up until this fall, and as a requirement, virtually all first-year students had to take it. And then in COM 101, almost every section would come to the library for at least one class period. And there is typically 35 sections or so. And so that just kind of gave us a reassurance that first-year students, that they were actually entering the library. They knew there was a library on campus, and that they actually knew that there was a library website where they could access library resources. As you probably know now, COM 101 is no longer required, and the number of sections have dropped considerably. So that's why I'm here, kind of begging you at your mercy, that now that you are teaching critical thinking courses, that you would consider including some library instruction in those courses. So I want to do a quick overview of some of the library instruction services that we offer. And every bullet on here, except for the last one, really requires no class time. These are all things that you can just link in Canvas and assign to your students outside of class. And then I am going to show you specific examples of each one of these. And then if you have any questions at the end, I'll be more than happy to answer those. So let me go to, again, I want to show you some real examples of library instruction services that we have available now, that we've been offering for years, but with the pandemic, there's been a new interest in it. And then again, with COM 101 no longer being required, really hope that you'll consider using any of these in your critical thinking courses. So we have some short YouTube videos. They're 4 minutes or less, just on general library topics. This one you see on the screen is how to navigate the UWSP Libraries website. We also have a virtual library tour that's 3.5 minutes long. Again, these are just YouTube videos. Can give you the YouTube link, and you can just plug those straight into Canvas, or share them on your syllabus, or however you'd like to do it. We can also, we've also created Canvas quizzes based on these YouTube videos, and I'm going to show you one of those in just a moment. Another service that we offer are what we call course guides, or online library guides. So these are online guides that we create specifically for your course, or even better yet, specifically for a research assignment within your course. So this is one that I've created that I'm actually going to be using later this afternoon with an English 202 class. They have to write a 3 to 5 page research paper on a historical figure So what I've done is I've created this online guide with direct links to library resources where they can find credible information on their historical figure to write their paper. And a lot of times this just helps overcome library anxiety. Where do I even begin? Specifically in this research assignment, they cannot use Wikipedia, they can't use Google. And so these, again, are direct links to library resources, to credible sources that the professor will accept for their research assignment. Again, if you're kind of more into the flipped classroom concept and you're really like, I cannot spare an entire class period to bring my students over to the library, you really don't have to. I or any of the librarians were more than happy to record a lecture. It can be an overview of, here are the research assignments in this course. Here are some places you can find sources for those research assignments. Again, it kind of works better if it's geared specifically toward one research assignment. And we can do a separate lecture for each research assignment that you have in your course. Just give you the Kaltura link or the YouTube link, and again, that you embed in Canvas. And then what I think actually works the best is kind of a combination, is where we record a lecture. So here, this is for COM 101. I've recorded a 12-minute lecture on how to find credible sources. And then I've embedded that 12-minute lecture into a Canvas quiz. So students watch this 12-minute video, and then they have to take a 5-question quiz in Canvas, which is then automatically graded in Canvas. Again, all outside of class, requires no class time at all. Again, if you do want to bring your students to the library for a class period, that's something we've offered for years and years and years, for decades, that we still offer that. We're happy to do that. And then these services are not mutually exclusive either. For example, the English 202 class that I'm teaching later today, the professor assigned the virtual library tour as a Canvas quiz. So they've taken that quiz already before coming to the library. I created a LibGuide. I showed you that already. And then they will be coming in later today, where I will guest lecture, showing them how to find sources for their research paper. So I hope something that I showed you tempted you, and you will consider using in your courses. And with that, I'll just go ahead and open up to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dave. I mean, Troy. Thank you, Troy. I was thinking about Dave, and I was trying to think, what other points does Dave usually make that we could, does anyone have any questions for Troy?
I have a quick one. How much notice would you need to set up one of your lectures with the research topics? Because I think this would be perfect for, history of European design. Students need to research some topics, and sometimes it's kind of hard to find those good, credible resources.
Yeah, not much. I'd say a few days. I mean, I just got one today, and I think I'll be doing it next week. We can turn these around pretty quickly.
Okay.
I mean, the more notice, the better. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris.
I was just going to say, I didn't know that service was available, so I'm
glad you came. Yes, it's available. Typically, what we'll do, Chris, is just, if you want it for specific research assignments, say, will you please send us that assignment ahead of time? And then if it's me, or a lot of times it depends who's kind of the expert in that, what librarian is the expert in that field. I'll create a online guide specific that students can use, and then I would just, you can bring your whole class to a computer lab here in the library. And it's very much a workshop format, where I have them log in, I have them follow along, I might have them do a worksheet as we go along, really try to get their hands dirty, get them into our databases, and get them some experience.
It sounds great.
Awesome. Yeah, please contact me.
You're the main contact for this.
Dave is, but he's not here. Any one of
Okay.
us, we're not territorial. So
Okay.
if you know, depending on when you would like to bring your students to the library or have a librarian visit your class, it just probably who's available or who feels strong in that topic. But yeah, we would love to
Okay.
help you out.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I think you just answered my question, but in the past, Dave's come to visit my classes and he's done a really great job in 30 minutes of walking students through a whole lot of virtual, sets of resources, everything from documentaries to, and it sounds like that's something that's also still available to us.
Oh yeah, yep. In any format, face-to-face, online, Zoom. I mean, really, we're flexible. We just happy for the opportunity and. And I should have said this at the beginning, but especially with the COM 101 requirement no longer there, I would just really recommend that don't assume that your students have ever been in the library, that they're aware of the library website, that they're aware of any of the hundreds of thousands, millions of library resources that are available to them. So I always, in my instruction, I always assume that this is the first time that a student has ever been exposed to anything in a college library. And I think I'm right most of the time. I'm sure you guys have all experienced that. It really varies, but as a rule, I really try to approach it that way.
I think Dave often tells a story about there was a student who was just not doing terribly well on her research projects, and it turns out that she was going home every weekend and using the little local library in her hometown because that's the one she felt comfortable with, and they just didn't have the resources. So that's always super illuminating to me.
Yeah, and it always breaks my heart if I hear a student buy something, a book on Amazon, or pay 30, 40 bucks to download a scholarly article on Google. My 2 bullet points for students are ask anything, buy nothing. So, and if they know at least that, they're gonna be okay.
Yeah, that's something else that Dave, that I'm just now remembering, I'm hearing Dave's voice in my head, that that the transition to the concept of threshold concepts for information literacy, and how one of those threshold concepts is that information has value. And a way to show them that is to have them do a search and see that if you were not affiliated with the university, you would need to pay like $40 to get this article, but because you are, we can take you behind that paywall. And I think that that also shows not only that information has value, because they might think, well, yeah, I mean, everything has value right now. You have to pay for everything, but that there's practical benefits that this library can give you. Like we can take care of some of those costs for you. So that's,
or you show them we actually spend $900,000 of their tuition dollars just to pay every year to access these items. So Maggie, the video that you requested yesterday, is going to cost us 500 bucks for 1 year. So information does have value.
What else do we have for Troy?
This is more maybe discipline specific, but when we're teaching design research in a lot of our design courses, we're often making attempts to get students to start to unpack things like how dialogues are happening in Wikipedia on the editor's pages, things like that, so that they can see kind of how that information is actually assembled. And also, in an effort to start to teach them the difference between primary and secondary resources and things like that. Are those lectures or conversations that you guys feel equipped to help us with, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm actually pretty ignorant when it comes to Wikipedia, just because most professors don't accept it. So I'm kind of like, but we have I can bone up on it, or we have librarians who would be glad to talk about it. But as far as like primary and secondary, yeah, that's a lecture I've given to COM 190, where they have to find they have to find both. And so, I'll say, give them examples of these are primary sources and these are examples of secondary sources. And then what are the difference? And then I'll even do like a quiz. Like I'll show them a source and say, would you consider this primary or would you consider this secondary? And they'll just do like a quiz. I used to do it on clickers, but we don't have those anymore. So I'll use like a poll everywhere website or something like that. But yeah, definitely we can cover both of those topics, whatever you need, Stuart.
Okay. Yeah, because it does. I mean, for us, social media often becomes a primary means of research when we're looking at demographics.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
it's like getting a student to understand how to learn about street mattressing in Stevens Point is kind of hard to do unless you can present them with the resources on social media to explore it with groups that might be, nationally or internationally based in that kind of practice, and then figure out how to sort out what is the valid information they're getting and what is the conjecture. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I wish there were black and white answers for that, but even for a librarian, it's so slippery. But at least you can kind of guide them in the right direction and give them some specific strategies that librarians use. There's a few out there, and every librarian kind of has their own like credibility test that they use. UW Green Bay Library, they developed an online one that I just love. You can use it on a website, on a scholarly article, on any kind of source, and it just asks you these point blank questions on each aspect of that source, and then it gives immediate feedback of why the source might be valid or might be credible, might not be. And at the end, it kind of gives an overall rating. I'd be happy to share that link with you. I just think it's fantastic.
Thanks.
I think Guillermo talked about that earlier in this week, didn't he, Troy? I mean, it's the same course, same challenges, right? And what I find interesting and sort of gratifying is that the issues are so cross-disciplinary. The distinction between a primary and a secondary source. Gee, that is important. And the things you look at might differ. But was it Guillermo who said that because, and this had not occurred to me, maybe you said it, that because everything is much of the information is presented digitally now, it's all in a screen, so it all sort of looks the same. So the distinction between what's a website, what's a newspaper, what's a journal article is not as literally tangible as it was before, right? Because it's all presented the same way.
Aaron or Amanda, that was actually a question they would ask, like, what is the name of this journal? She would show them an article and actually point blank, what is the name of this journal? And some students were unable to answer that. And again, I see that in classrooms all the time. It's just words on a screen. They're not used to they didn't grow up with the physical format like I did. And so they don't know it's an encyclopedia, it's a journal, it's an ebook, it's a blog. They have no idea. Those are all kind of foreign concepts to them. It's just, these are words I found through Google. So
I have a question. I've talked to you about this a little bit, Troy, but having you here is reminding me of how interested I am in talking to you and coordinating with my courses about video footage as a primary source, and how we can find media besides just by searching and what we can find on YouTube. And I feel like my searching skills are personally really limited as far as where I can find, like, any search beyond YouTube for just like video of the Hurricane Andrew in 1995 or whatever.
Okay.
Like I don't even know where to start. I know that the Library of Congress has moving image archives, and archive.org has archives, but I'm just curious if this is, if you can point students to a bunch of other resources, specifically ones that are maybe and then there's all the copyright issues involved in like, well, I want to use this footage from this newscast or
Gotcha.
whatever. I wonder if you could speak to how you would approach that a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, Sam, did you want to chime in on that quick before I?
Yeah, like Kevin said a word that it's interesting. I don't know if this is something the library can use and do. There's always this conversation about copyright and intellectual property. A lot of the students fear that they can't use a lot of the resources they find online because they're breaking the law. But I know there's a good amount of information on fair use and academic freedom, or just that they can still practice and using all of these images. Is this the kind of workshop that the library can have? And
Oh
can
yeah,
do?
definitely. Yeah, I mean, and there's ways to filter too, like Creative Commons, and there are image sites that everything in there is Creative Commons, and be happy to show students that. And I oftentimes I think students and really just society in general, we're so afraid of violating copyright, but if it's for education, you really have a pretty good license to use a lot of that stuff. What I really try to stress to students is make sure you're citing it. Don't borrow something without citing it. You borrow something without citing it, that's plagiarism. We're going to kick you out of school. You borrow something and you cite it, we're going to give you a college degree. And it's really that serious. So but yeah, I think both what you said, Sam, and then Kevin, what you were getting at, be happy, me or someone else, to show to have students come in or come to your class, or I think what might work well is those online guides. Like, here are places where you can find video footage, or here are websites where there are Creative Commons images and videos, and so they can just go right to that one course, just have everything on one page and just start clicking away and searching within those, and then they can avoid the Google and can I use this, can I not type scenario. So I think a library guide would probably suffice in both of those. But then it's always fun, if you have the time, to bring them to the library. Like, we have Art Store, which is really cool. There's design stuff in there, and it's just you can get lost in there, but there's just tons of images in there, including like classic paintings, and you can zoom in so far and you can actually see like the individual brush strokes and things like that. And just having students go in there and then say, okay, I want you to find this painting or this chair or this architecture or whatever it is, and now look at the metadata and say, what year was this painting, or what were the materials used for this painting, and just, again, kind of a workshop. I want you in that database, I want your hands dirty, and I want you searching for things, instead of just me blabbing at them. Did that help, Kevin and Sam? I feel like I kind of sidestepped.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest issues is if students end up doing any kind of print or sculptural work or anything that, I mean, they're not gonna have a chance to cite the work, right? And I remember taking this workshop a long time ago about what would be considered like fair use in the academic realm as a student.
Yeah.
But when it comes to mixed media and using images, like, is there any information that could alleviate the pressure?
Yeah.
In a way?
I think we could do something like that. It might be as simple as you pick the writing style, MLA, APA, whatever, and then we can show them, say, okay, you can use this. You just have to cite it correctly, and this is how to do that.
But yeah, but it's not writing. That's the thing. Like, nobody's
Yeah.
writing anything. They're making media, so they can be either other kind of visual posters, graphics, or anything. So there's not a document that links to that writing. So it's about using the images that they can find online as part of their end product in a way.
Right. Yeah, that's something you and I might have to sit down and talk about. But I even something like that, I would really encourage a works cited page. You know, even if it's a sculpture and they use some other artist's work or an image or something like that. Like I'm also submitting a works cited page showing where I got any borrowed material on this. So, but again, I'm probably not answering your question directly, and that might be something we have to kind of sit down. Yeah, go ahead, Stuart. I'm sorry.
And I might be able to help you with that, Sam, because we do have in our graphic design handbook, we have a whole series of ways that citations can happen. We run into this a lot with students when they're creating final portfolios to do things like job interview. And a lot of times the citations are verbal in the presentation. So in other words, it's actually saying that this is structured on something that you found, or it's actually cited right on the slide. It's important, I think, in our discipline because we need to distinguish between what has been borrowed and what we're making, especially for our students going forward, because I mean, we've had lots of instances where we've even had instances where, I mean, the plagiarism issue, it just gets incredibly complicated for us sometimes, because we've had issues where students have presented stuff based on found work, claimed it as their own, and then actually been hit with plagiarism charges, which were valid because they weren't cited works. And that's even happened in the professional world for us. We had a student who submitted a poster to a competition, and the photographer whose photograph she was using happened to go to that competition and saw it. And she had signed a form saying that all of the work was original. So she actually never ended up finishing school here because it opened up a whole search through her portfolio, which revealed that almost everything had been lifted and doctored, and that none of the changes constituted anything that would, and it's also hard for us because a lot of times what we teach them that, especially within graphic design, we're trying to teach them for how to function professionally. And if we only function under the auspices of what can happen in education, they're not equipped to function professionally because that's a different set of rules in the professional world.
Right. And I guess overall, it's just, it could be simple as, if you're going to grab images from the internet, if you're going to manipulate them, there's a certain percentage of the image that you can grab, right? So it's like, if you manipulate the image up to a point that it's unrecognizable, there's a way that can be used as fair use in the academic setting. Yeah. Or if you grab an image of a hand and you trace that hand and then you draw the hand, like, would students think like, I am plagiarizing the image because I'm replicating the hand, right? And it's a lot of these little fine area that even in the professional world, like that, artists do that all the time, right? And it's something that students need to be really aware of, that whether it's breaking anything or they can be encouraged into using a lot of these resources they have available for them. It's just like, if there's anyone knowledgeable enough to kind of have that fair use in the art world rather than just the writing piece. That was my question. That was all.
Yeah, I think, Sam, you'll find too that the writing styles, like APA until 2 years ago, didn't even like recognize the web, the internet. I mean, seriously. And now it showed you how to like cite tweets. I mean, and I think everything you just mentioned, I would just consider fair use if as long as it's for an educational project, that they're not making T-shirts and going out and trying to sell those. Again, so yeah, I think it's great, and we do have our dean, the college dean, and then our director too are both copyright experts, and I think they'd be happy to work with you and your students. And Stuart, can I borrow you for all of my library instruction sessions, because I want students to hear that you can get caught plagiarizing, and you can be punished. And really, overall, the problem on our campus that I found from a librarian viewpoint isn't that students are citing sources incorrectly, is that they're not citing them at all, and that's just really unacceptable. That's a cardinal rule in college. You just can't break.
Well, I mean, if this happened, and this is going to sound really bad, if the student's work is incredibly good, it should be questionable. Let's just put it that way.
Oh,
Well,
that's true. Yeah, I mean, if one of my freshman students writes a brilliant paper, I'm going to think, But what I love about this conversation, and I'm wondering if this would be a little bit time consuming, but it might be something, if you could see if there's interest on campus for, Troy, is a conversation about these standards, not necessarily even in an academic context, because I think Stuart's right. You know, it's nice for them to know that there are other constituencies to which they will be beholden. There are other standards of professional activity, right? And that they should know those, and we are trying to prepare them to enter that world. And that world can be murky in terms of fair use. What can you capture? What can you use? When do you need to give credit? When don't you need to give credit? And it strikes me that the same questions arise, or very similar, structurally similar questions arise in the context of writing something or creating something in mixed media, something that's not a written artifact. Because in all of those, you are using, if you are engaged in scholarship or creation as a conversation, you are intentionally referencing or using things that have gone before you. So how much can you use? What should the citation be? Yeah, I mean, because, you know, we say, at least in philosophy, it's like common knowledge. Like I can say, Descartes said cogito ergo sum. I don't normally have to cite that. Kind of like everybody knows that. But then what counts as common knowledge? How are they to know what counts as common knowledge if they have no knowledge in the discipline? So yeah, I love that.
So yeah, Troy, I will be very interested if we can keep the conversation to do a specific copyright and academic fair use for creative spaces.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Again, it might not be me, but I would definitely hook you up with a librarian, or I'd be happy to do it too. Yeah, because I think you can really, alleviate a lot of the fears for students, especially if they're feeling kind of handcuffed that way. So I hopefully it would kind of be almost freeing to them to know that they can use others' works if they properly cite them for educational uses.
Yeah. So yeah, shoot me an email and I'll
Okay.
be happy to continue this conversation.
Okay.
This might make the conversation around plagiarism in written context more meaningful for students, because I think some students think, well, writing papers, that's an academic enterprise. These rules about plagiarism, they are sort of artificially imposed because the professor wants to know what I know. It's all about assessing me and my thought processes, right? And that's why it's important. But that's part of it, sure. But I think they get that in broader production arenas, like putting up something on YouTube. I think they get what's wrong with grabbing somebody else's content and putting it up as if it's their own. That's because that's kind of a world they live in more. So I almost think of, for them, it might be switched. I mean, I think for me, at least, I'm thinking of fair use in non-written contexts as an extension of what goes on in written context. But I'm thinking for many of our students, it could reverse, it could illuminate in the other way. I totally get why it's important, why I can't just put something up on Flickr or some other, I can't just yik yak somebody else's video and pretend it's mine, or TikTok it, right? I can't do that. And similarly then with writing, I can't write something and pretend that these thoughts are mine when they're not. It's the same thing. Yeah, that would be cool.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I took a bunch of time.
Oh.
What else? What other kind of, I'm just curious, and if anyone else has another question, I'd much rather have you ask your question, but if you don't, have any of you encountered any, yeah, Chris.
I just wanted to ask, what are we telling students these days about, what reasons are we giving them about going into the library versus just the search site? what kind of, selling features are there? Because, we have schools like Pacelli who don't have books anymore in their library, which blows my mind. And we are reducing the amount of stacks all the time. So, what do we tell students? What's the value of going into the library?
I'm kind of the opposite in that I say you actually don't have to come into the library if you don't want to, because probably over 90% of all our materials are online. And the reason I say that for two things is that during the pandemic, there was kind of mass confusion among students and faculty that they couldn't access library materials, and it just wasn't true. Almost, again, over 90% of all of our materials is available online, off campus, or including off campus. The other thing is the library building is going to be demolished next summer. So we will have a presence over in Cullen's classroom. But again, I think there's tons of benefits for coming in, especially our print reference books. I really try to promote those to our students, but because of the pandemic and because the building's going to be coming down, we've even ramped up considerably our online reference books and such too. So what we deal with mainly is just library anxiety. Students are just overwhelmed by the sheer size and resources available in a college library, and so that is our number one obstacle that we face when trying to reach students. So if they're comfortable coming in, and that's why we have that 3.5-minute virtual tour with Stevie Pointer, we try to make it just fun and easy to follow along. But if they're not, they don't have to. I mean, they can even text a librarian research questions. We have a dedicated text phone number. We have chat. So we really want to meet the students where they are. So I probably didn't answer your question very well, Chris, but I think there's a misconception among students that libraries are just warehouses of books, and that's really the furthest from the truth. Yes, we have 500,000 books in this building, but we have access. There are 8 million books in Search at UW. There's hundreds of millions of full text scholarly articles in Search at UW. We have 290 databases that we subscribe to. We have 130,000 online journals that we subscribe to, and you don't have to come into the library for any of them. So sorry, Chris, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's what I needed to hear.
I wish I had an elevator speech, but no, we love them and we want them to come in and study here and ask questions and everything. But if that is outside their comfort zone, we can get them anything, anywhere.
Okay, thanks.
What other questions are there for Troy before I ask one of you, which I don't need to get to, but. The question I have of you then, and to some extent it may have already been answered, is what information literacy challenges do you think are most pressing right now for your students? I mean, certainly one of them is the whole citing. How do you, what does citation mean in the context of the production of artifacts that aren't textual? That's a big one.
I would say the biggest one that we're facing, and I think that society as a whole is facing right now, is just confirmation bias. When I was in college a million years ago, it was hard to find sources. I think there was, I went to the University of Minnesota, and I think there was one computer on the entire campus that had LexisNexis access, and you could never get on it. I think it was all CD-ROM or something like that. So you would just kind of scrounge your way, and if you would find any journal article that was even remotely relevant to your topic, you would use it, and you would kind of base your argument around that source because it's one of the few you could find. Today, it's the exact opposite. So whatever biases that students come into and they want to write, do a research project on that topic, they can just Google and they can find, however many required sources, 5 or 7, that match their already entrenched bias perfectly. And they can say, then it just entrenches it more. They can just point to these sources and say, see, he's saying that, see, they're saying that, see, so I'm right, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, there are real challenges is like, don't just Google for sources that agree with you. Explore some of these library resources that are credible and that actually disagree with you, because your job is to, if you are giving an argument in your research assignment, is you have to at least acknowledge the other side, and better yet, refute the other side. And so that is really research assignments, I believe, and no fault of faculty have become just kind of an exercise in confirmation bias. It is so easy to find sources that agree with your already entrenched biases. And then it's trying to get students to break out of that, to say, no, go to somewhere other than Google and look for sources on your topic that may disagree with you. Or even just ones that provide factual information, encyclopedias, something like that, something other than Wikipedia, other than Google. Did that help, Donna?
It does. It does. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. What about from an instructor point of view?
I mean, I would agree with what Troy is saying, and I think search engine optimization increases the likelihood of that, and especially if you're using the same browser search tools each time, because it starts to develop patterns for you.
Mhm.
The other thing that I see happening a lot is an inability for students to search beyond the exact language that you give them as a starting point. So I've spent a lot of time in class trying to get them to learn how to search the initial term to lead to new terms, to search from those so that they can, and it's a very hard thing. I mean, one of the assignments that we use in graphic design, it's a systems-based study, and we use isms. And one of the isms that I think I gave out one year was, it was a political ism that was it, but the student came back and said there's absolutely no information out there on that. And I was like, you've got to be kidding, right? And what they were doing was typing in that ism, and they were coming up with definitions of it, but no explanations per se. And so we had to spend a lot of time looking at, okay, what are the definitions of it? Neoconservative, that's what it was. And so we had to look at that, take that apart. What was neo, what was conservative? Maybe you have to look at both of these things in relation to each other to understand the birth of that ism. But that was not in their wheelhouse, really. So that idea of like getting them to understand how to search for things, even using the internet and Google as a tool, and getting them to go beyond that first word. That's something I've struggled with.
Other than jam printers, keywords, search terms are the hardest part about being a librarian, because you just have to keep trying, and it's crazy. 2 words that might mean the same thing you'll just get completely different search results. And the thing that I've seen is because of Google, students are used to they'll put in their whole 10 or 20 word research question into a library database. And that may work to some extent in Google, but in a library database, it's not going to work at all. And so then they come and they say, I couldn't find anything because I stuck 20 search terms in there, and there was no document that matched all 20 of those terms. And so my big thing with students is like, start with 1, maybe if you're really feeling adventurous, 2 words to put into a search bar in a library database, and go from there. And again, it's just how are students supposed to know? They didn't grow. I don't blame them at all, but this is what they're facing.
Well, and I feel like often we're bucking patterns that are developed in high school, where to me it's unacceptable practice. A lot of what research tools are being taught in high school students, and a lot of the high school settings that I've seen, including my own kids, they're taught to basically just go out and collect information for a paper or a presentation without actually reflecting on any of it or finding various positions in relation to it. So there's a lot of unlearning that I feel like we're involved in doing at that level. Well, about 5 years ago in the graphic design area, we actually kind of all committed to this idea of building assignments that were unsearchable. So for the very reason you brought up, because we were finding that we would build an assignment and a student would basically type in exactly what the assignment was and then hit image, and they would come up with a whole bunch of tropes and completed, you know, and then they couldn't get their head out of that. And so all they could do was continue to reproduce what they had seen. So, you know, if it had the word milk in it, it had a cow in it, or black spots, and getting them to think beyond that became really challenging. So we actually started writing assignments together where one of the first things we would do is just type the assignment in to the search bar to see what it pulled up, and then reword the assignment until it took them to a place where they were either getting conflicting information they had to process, or, you know, something like that. But yeah, no, I think that's learning in the same way that I think, you know, Troy, you referenced going to school a million years ago. I can share that feeling now. But like, we were taught to use the card catalog, to use the you know, all of the reference material to get to what we needed. And I feel like we're jumping over that at the high school level now. And then we get the students, and no one has really sat down with them and said, okay, the internet is a really powerful tool, but how do we maximize search potential on it to get as many opinions, positions, you know, how do we really use those search engines, and what is the difference between them? How come, I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to students about this. Why is it that if I search in Google, I come up with different responses than if I use a different search engine? And how is that happening? I mean, you know, because I think those are important things for them to see, to better understand that search tool, that card catalog that they're now using, or those reference materials that they're now using.
I'd love to sit in those classes too.
Yeah.
I would learn a lot. And Dave is going to be doing a 3-credit a course next semester that are really going to dive into some of those. So.
Well, I see that we are at 10 minutes to 10. So thank you all so much. Thank you, especially Troy, for taking time out to come and talk to us. And you can expect to get an email from me later today or tomorrow talking about the subsequent meetings. And I will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you. Great questions, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.